Sasha, you need to mute your mic.
All right, we're live.
Just going to wait a couple more minutes and then we'll get started. All right, everybody, let's all join together and have fun at our next lecture this evening. I'm Reed Kroloff, Dean of the College of Architecture at IIT, and it's my pleasure to welcome all of you to a terrific lecture. I'm very excited to be here and to be a part of it. We've got two guests with us this evening who really are part of the IIT family and have been now for several years, especially because of their relationship initially with one of our programs, MCHAP, the Mies Crown Hall Americas Prize, which they snagged just a little while back for a wonderful building of theirs that I know they're going to talk about tonight, so I won't do that. We've got a couple of introductions that will help you meet Sandra Barkley and Jean-Pierre Crousse and their eponymous practice as well. They are part of the lecture series that I know all of you have come to enjoy this semester. We've had an extraordinary group of people with us, thanks to our lecture committee who has brought them together. We started, as you know, this semester with a really stirring lecture from Emmanuel Pratt at the Sweetwater Foundation, followed up just a week later by Marion Weiss and Michael Manfredi, and recently a talk with Jeannie Gang, and now tonight's talk. I also want to invite you to come next week, where we're going to hear from an exceptional pair of young landscape architectural practices in China, and then we'll finish up a week later with a panel on why it is that we do what we do. But tonight's lecture, I have to thank the Victor Morgenstern Family Foundation for underwriting this talk and underwriting so many things here in the college. The Morgensterns not only have delivered us wonderful support for our programs, but are also members of the board and have been a part of the college community for many, many years. And we really thank you so much for this, as well as for the Morgenstern Chair, which we'll learn a little bit about next semester. But for now, I don't want to take any more time myself. I'd like to turn the introduction over to Dirk Dennison on our faculty, who will introduce Sandra and Jean-Pierre to give tonight's lecture. So thank you both for being with us. We're just thrilled to have you. And now over to you, Dirk. Or not. We seem to have lost Dirk for a moment here. He was here moments ago, and there he is again.
Did you
So
hear-
we're glad you came back to join us, Dirk. I was just introducing you and saying what an amazing technological wizard you are.
Oh, thank you.
And so here,
I-
here you
I
are
will give
joining in.
myself, I will give myself and all of my colleagues a lot of credit for being much more technologically adept now than we were 6 months ago. So
I think we all are, and we're pleased. And Dirk, as I think all of our students and those in the outside world may not know this, but our students do, and our faculty do. Dirk has been managing the MCHAP program for us for the last 6 years, and so we welcome you and look forward to your comments on the Barkley and Cruz practice. Dirk.
thank you, Reed, and welcome all of you and Sandra and Jean-Pierre, and a special thank you to the Morgensterns as well. You're just our champions, and you make all of our lives richer. It's really exciting to me to be able to welcome our speakers this evening. In other times, we would be welcoming you here in Crown Hall, and we will look forward to doing that in the future, but super excited to be able to share across the Americas here with you today. As Reed mentioned, Barclay Cruz is the 2018 MCHAP award winner for their Edificio A at the University of Pura in the north of Peru. Now let's see, bear with me here. The image is up. I had the amazing opportunity on our jury visit to see the building, an office, classroom, and auditorium structure that's truly a melting pot of students and faculties bringing together this diverse disciplines of the Pura University. This dynamic happens in and between the elements of its formal and spatial composition and through its integration of the inside and out of building and landscape. Inverse to our own SR Crown Hall, whose transparent and ephemeral skin of glass allows the interior space to reach out and embrace the landscape. In Pura, their building brings the landscape in, activating the space between. And in this, for me, it's truly a new archetype. Our 2018 jury chair, let's not age him too much, 2018 jury chair, Ricky Burdett, CBE of London and the London School of Economics, said of their building, quote, "By reducing its footprint and optimizing its shading potential, its very compactness forces its users to come together, optimizing the democratic potential of the building and to be inhabited by young people for generations to come." Adding to this, our juror Rodrigo Perez de Arce of Chile stated that their design, quote, "is not just a product, but actually an exploration of a type. It is, therefore, a set of spatial notions that invites emulation." Sandra, Barclay, and Jean-Pierre Cruz founded their international practice of Barclay Cruz architecture in 1994 in Paris, then moving it to Lima in 2006, with an emphasis on improving the natural and built environments with a rational and sustainable approach to architecture. Just a second. Practice. Their practice in a wide range of programs poetically infuses performance, space, and light into the articulation of the relationship of landscape and human well-being. Sandra Barkley received her architecture degrees from École d'Architecture de Paris Belleville, while Jean-Pierre holds degrees from URP in Lima and the Politico de Milan in Italy. Both Barclay and Cruz earned master's degrees in landscape and territory from the Universidad Diego Portales in Santiago, Chile. Barclay is the honorary fellow of the American Institute of Architects and a foreign honorary member of the French Académie d'Architecture. In 2018, the Architecture Review and Architects Journal awarded Sandra Barkley their Women in Architecture Architect of the Year Award. Cruz also taught Cruz also taught internationally and has served as a member of the South American project at Harvard's GSD. They have both been on the faculty of Pontificio Universidad Católica de Peru since 2006, and most recently in 2019 were appointed the Norman Foster Visiting Professorship of Architectural Design at Yale. The work of Barclay Cruz was presented in the Peruvian Pavilion at the 2012 Venice Biennale, and Sandra and Jean-Pierre were the 2016 curators, for which they received the jury's Special Merit Award. Their work was again in 2018 invited to be in the Central Pavilion, at the time in which Sandra also served as a juror for the Golden Lion Awards. In addition to being laureates of the Mies Crown Hall America's Prize, Barclay Cruz has also received the Latin American Prize in 2013, the inaugural Oscar Niedermeyer Prize in 2016, and the Pan American Architects Association Award, and have received twice, in 14 and in 16, the Peruvian Architecture National Prize. With a worldwide audience for their work, the College of Architecture and MCHAP are particularly excited to share the announcement of their forthcoming book, Intimacy, Landscape of Intimacy, produced in partnership with Arkeen and the IIT Architecture Chicago Press, which will be released in January of this coming year. So with that, I'm honored to welcome our evening's speakers, Sandra Barkley and Jean Perez Cruz. Welcome, guys.
Thank you. And hello, and thank you, Reed, for your words, and Dirk for your presentation. Amazing presentation.
Yeah, and also, of course, thanks to Sasha, Christine, Leslie, and all our friends.
Daniel, Andrew.
At the IIT. Yes. And of course, everybody that is today attending the lecture in this quite stressful day. Not only for US citizens, I should say. So we're going to share the screen. I don't know, Dirk, can you tell us if everything is okay?
It's up, yep, up and running.
Okay. Perfect. So, Sandra, begin.
Yes, our work is an ongoing research in which each project informs the next one, as if they were one single work. We always try to formulate the pertinent questions that will guide our decisions, not pretending to find the answers, but to help us find the meaning our buildings should convey with the means we have at our disposal.
We're also interested in how history can guide the questions we ask ourselves in our quest for meaning in our projects. 21 centuries ago, the non-alignment of the triglyph and the angled column was considered a huge architectural problem in the Greek temples. So Vitruvius proposed a solution that you see at the bottom right that was adopted in many Roman Doric temples. In fact, the angle of a building has always been an architectural problem, dealing on how to articulate two joining facades. And in the 20th century, Mies developed a patient search in this articulation, not only as a formal issue, but also as a structural and technical question. As architecture is made by the doing, iteration is essential, and history can be a powerful ally if we train ourselves into observation.
It happened that we were observing and drawing the same angles in Chicago 20 years ago when we came to the US after I got a Fulbright fellowship to study iron and steel buildings in North America. But we ended to be more attracted in how Mies could be able to create an urban landscape with a couple of buildings. We even started imagining how the Farnsworth house could iterate to capture a space in between.
We were amazed to see buildings constructing landscapes and dazzled by how even the entire territory could become a human abstraction by the Jefferson grid, and yet be able to adapt to geographical landmarks as this meanders river at right. In the past 30 years, we've been accumulating experience by observation and by the doing, learning to acknowledge the legacy we have before our eyes, distilled and refined by many centuries of doing, adjusting and adapting.
A constant and resolute work is, of course, part of this patient search that constitutes what we call the culture of work. In each project, we go from sketches to the model, then to the precise drawing, into the reality, and then back again to sketches, models, and drawings. It is a circular dynamic between mind, hand, and matter. There is one building in Lima which has been very important for us, the 15th century Puruchuco Palace, built by a pre-Columbian local chief that has created a whole lineage in our work. In fact, this building was very influential in many of our projects, and as we will see, finally brought us back to Chicago. Puruchuco is about a series of platforms that define the horizontal ground for life and an enclosure that ensures domesticity and intimacy. In the plan at left, you can see in gray the interior spaces and in white what we call the indoor exteriors. In our mild climate, these contained open-air spaces are as important as the more traditional indoor covered spaces, as they can be used all year long. They are interconnected by narrow alleys, creating a meaningful sequence of compressed and expanded rooms combined with the height of the platforms, which allow to rise and frame the views of the valley or to sunken frame exclusively the sky. These spaces reconcile intimacy with vastness. The 5 projects we are going to show you set a lineage that starts with this one.
Shortly after opening our office in Peru, we received the commission to design a quite big suburban house in Lima, the F house. And we wanted this house to look small and the gardens and courtyards to look big. The enclosure, mandatory in local regulations in Lima, unify the different open spaces the same way as Puruchuco does. A section helps understanding the project. We first draw the enclosure up to the street at right, and due to the large program of the house, we created a level underground, digging 2 shifted courtyards and connecting both levels by a ramp. This constellation of open spaces enriches the way the house is used by children and parents, as well as the way we go from one place to another. Once we cross the enclosure, leaving the street behind, we are still in an outdoor contained space, and we have to walk down the alley at left in order to get into the house. Meanwhile, at right, a garden unfolds in the sunken level where the children's bedrooms are located. The parents' courtyard at the same sunken level is visually connected by a diagonal to the children's garden. A suspended concrete vault shelters the social spaces and helps contain and stabilize the interior space, while allowing a wide opening into the main ground level garden.
Some years later, we designed the A4 house, located in a typical urban plot of Lima, 15 meters wide and 35 meters deep. Again, we decided to create an intimate landscape in the confined space of the plot. We draw the plot in section with the back neighbor at left and the street at right. We then define the limits of the plot mandatory in the urban regulations. We introduce open air features as a pool at left, a pond at right, and gardens planted with trees. In between, a series of 3 vaulted bridges spread over the width of the plot. These bridges sustain the program of bedrooms and intimate spaces, leaving the ground floor completely fluid and open. From the street, the house doesn't reveal its interior. The front volume acts as a threshold between the street and the indoor exteriors. Once you cross it, space suddenly unfolds. As we get inside, reflections and transparencies take us where interior and exterior spaces are blurred, creating a landscape of intimacy. Space expands through the vaulted bridges, liberating the boundaries between house, garden, and pool. Unlike the previous house, here's not about courtyards, but a fluid space under a succession of suspended volumes, where covered spaces are equivalent to the uncovered ones. In the upper level, volumes are connected with glazed bridges open over the gardens and the intimate landscape created below.
The next step in this series of landscapes of intimacy was taken when we were asked to design a restaurant that could represent Lima's uniqueness. It's almost permanent gray sky, as you can see, absence of rain, great gastronomy, and the well-being of Liman people. We thought this aspect should be at the core of the project, taking in account, of course, this noisy metropolitan avenue crossing the neighborhood. The typical introspection of colonial and pre-Hispanic residences was very useful for this project. The enclosure, in this case, helps to create here a quiet place. 5 modular volumes are supported by the enclosure, organizing a series of indoor-exterior spaces. The modules host different functions, and the spaces in between create a fluid space where more informal atmospheres are proposed. Every module has a skylight that ensures natural lighting and ventilation. We get to the inside by a gap between the 2 modules, letting us into the protected indoor exterior. Each module defines a precise space with a precise function, but at the same time, open up and merges with a completely open exterior space. Again, an intimate microcosm is created by intermediate spaces. A large fluid space emerges at the eye level, similar to the living area in the A4 house. This intermediate space is alternately compressed and expanded by the asymmetric arrangement of the modules, producing the quality of an intimate urban space or an exterior indoors, where Lima's white sky become the ceiling. Here, open air space is not merely an extension of what happens in the covered spaces, but an activated space on its own. The next step was to change scale and explore how the in-between spaces can be meaningful in a much larger and a public building.
We'd like to take you virtually to the south of Peru in Moquegua at the gate of the Atacama Desert. The regional government created a new cultural, sports, and commercial complex between the city and its river. An architectural competition was organized to build the region's own government headquarters. We proposed a compact volume to be able to create a public space that wasn't asked in the competition brief. The city has an intense blue sky and an extremely high solar radiation. We created a plinth that contains this time services and archives to generate a new high ground between the city and the mountains. 5 buildings. In this section, we see only 3 of them cover a roofed atrium, which acts as a prolongation of the public space. The atrium frames views of the city and the landscape. The buildings on top are separated by narrow courtyards, allowing cross ventilation and direct control of sunlight. The offices benefit from a north and south glazed facade open to these narrow courtyards that protect them from the rising and the setting sun by a circular, almost blind perimeter. The in-between spaces act here as environmental devices, allowing natural landing and cross-ventilation of interior working places, avoiding air conditioning and therefore reducing energy consumption. The public square will be an active place when the school and the sports facilities will be completed. The public auditorium is directly accessible from this public space along the shaded pergola, while access to the offices is made through the ramp at left, leading us to the covered public atrium. It offers a place in the shade for gathering, and once you cross the atrium, you arrive to an open-air central void that connects the buildings and the courtyards. This indoor exterior has a metallic roof that absorbs heat and creates an air depression, funneling air through the building. The lateral courtyards are directly linked to this central space. And the vertical sun of the tropical latitude allows to bring abundant light to these spaces. The courtyards are partially open to the city and the mountains, framing views of the landscape.
This takes us to the last project of this lineage, some 2,500 kilometers north, not far from the border with Ecuador. And that's it, the University of Pura. Only 4...
Edificio E.
Edificio E.
Known, more known.
Yeah.
By Edificio E.
So in this campus of the University of Pura, the university needed more space for welcoming a new student population from low-income rural backgrounds, thanks to a government scholarship. In 2015, 700 of these students were accepted, so new facilities of generic classrooms and faculty offices were needed. The authorities' aspiration was to take this opening to improve teaching infrastructure and gave us the chance to go beyond a standard response to this need. When the university was founded 50 years ago, it looked like the top image. When El Niño phenomenon happened in 1983, it began raining. The provost followed the advice of some good professors and decided that the first move after the completion of the first building that you see in the image should be to plant carob trees that will grow with the heavy rains of El Niño. And these visions took the university to look at as the bottom image that you see here. This image is was taken two years from now. So the decision of start developing a campus by planting trees instead of buildings was, of course, a big inspiration for us. Our first question was about how should be a place for learning here in this tropical dry forest in the middle of the desert. reading Louis Kahn is always a good hint when one wants to go back to the roots of a question of an institution. As he said, and I quote, schools began with a man under a tree who did not know he was a teacher, sharing his realization with a few others who did not know they were students, end quote. And for us, it wasn't only about a single tree, but a great interior space, as shown in this Swiss engraving from 1654.
The tropical dry forest helped us translate this very easily into architecture. We start drawing the soft hills of the tropical dry forest, then the planted carob trees and the clearing left for future buildings. We start by extending the shade of the forest at the place of the building. A single horizontal line is created to define a shaded space capable of creating good conditions for learning. Then the program grows as in La Tourette, from the rooftop down to the ground. The result is a series of buildings which are less important than the spaces left in between them.
The spaces in between are in fact the places for informal learning. This is Latin America. I don't know if you hear, but there's a band playing.
We will speak louder.
Yeah.
The creation.
Go ahead.
Yeah. The creation of non-hierarchical spaces for students to study, eat, connect, and discuss together outside the classrooms contributes to creating a sense of community. Social and economic boundaries are blurred between the newly arrived rural students and the local urban ones. These thoughts brought us to abandon the traditional type of educational building, shifting from the typical academic scheme into a learning landscape. By doing that, we were not only introducing the landscape of the dry forest, but making a learning citadel where the urban space is more important than single buildings.
The generic program of different sized classrooms, workshops, and faculty offices was fitted in a 70 by 70 meter square and organized as independent buildings. So it was like an additive operation. So 11 independent structures extend the roofs over the spaces in between. And this was very strategic as we had contradictory regulations and we had only 15 months to design and build it. So it was very important, the little time we had to conceive this building and to build it. The Peruvian anti-seismic regulation compels all new educational buildings to be able to serve as shelters in case of major earthquakes. As a consequence, buildings must have regular shapes, if not symmetrical plans. So you can see our building is not at all regular nor symmetrical. So for this purpose, each volume was considered as a single regular building separated by large construction joints. And for safety regulation instead, the complex was considered as one single building in order to reduce the number of staircases. And because of the tighter academic schedule, as I said, the whole design phase had to be executed in 6 months, while site works had to last only 9, opening in March 2016. In order to standardize design and construction solutions, we created 6 building types of a total of 11 volumes. that are marked with these numbers. Also, separating them by large gaps allow us to reduce the construction time by shifting work teams from one structure to the other. The building type numbers refer also to the sequence of the construction, as we can see in this image. So the long building, faculty offices building named after one was the first who was begun in construction. Then the teams passed in 2 and 3, 4, and so forth. Sun radiation was the most important problem to solve, not only the time, but sunlight, in order to reach the comfort zone without air conditioning. The roof surface is much bigger than the functional program in order to provide shading from the vertical sun. The gaps between buildings provide the right amount of sunlight to the exterior spaces. It's all marked in yellow. Each facade responds to its orientation. The building is perfectly oriented north, south, east, west. And that's because in an equatorial latitude, north and south are completely equivalent. So these two exposures have the same treatment of vertical louvers that are represented in blue here. East and west orientations, so at right and at left in the plan, are much more critical and have a lattice shuttering of plain or plain facade that are represented in red in this scheme. The in-between spaces form a simple rectangle in the second floor, connected by stairs and a double ramp in the east building at right, while in the ground floor, it multiplies, creating differentiated spaces for informal learning. Finally, this apparently compact scheme shelters an extremely permeable, shaded and cross-ventilated space. And it's permeable not only for people, but for the breeze coming on from the south.
Following the logics of an oriented building, the south and north facade are protected by vertical louvers, which are very efficient to protect both sides in this latitude. In the west facade, a system of prefab concrete panels protect the faculty offices from the setting sun. These panels were prefab on site with a very simple technology. We didn't have the millimeter precision of industrialized countries, so we allowed a bigger tolerance in our project. This is very important when designing in countries like ours, and by doing that, we incorporate imperfection as a positive value also.
The building that hosts the ramps and services constitute the east side, where the main entry from the campus pedestrian pathway is located. So this is the main entrance. And each building, of course, was thoroughly studied through models, physical and virtual models, drawings. And the entrance building is, in fact, for us, a threshold where we pass through a double ramp from the strong glare of the exterior to the shaded exterior spaces of the learning landscape. The lattice shuttering served not only as a thermal protection from exterior heat, but acts also as a light modulator in order to accommodate our eyes to the shaded half-light spaces of the indoor exteriors. While we go up through the ramps or just crossing through this building. As we said, the narrow gaps that single buildings leave between them help the light come in and favors natural ventilation. The gaps oriented, because the building is oriented, the gaps are also oriented. And the gaps oriented east-west are in fact a calendar that registers the sun inclination over the year. For instance, when we see here the light beam on the floor, it means we are in the winter season. Well, if we see the beam hitting the walls at left, it means we are in the summer season. And you can imagine here, there in Pura, because we're in Lima, it's not the temperature between season which makes the difference. It's always hot. The gaps oriented north-south are, on the contrary, sun clocks that register the daily movement of the sun. And there are moments in which both directions cross each other, or we can say where calendars and sun clocks meet together.
The classrooms and workshops have large openings oriented north and south, while the faculty offices have narrow vertical openings. This helps provide the needed intimacy for faculty members. Nevertheless, in order not to disconnect them from the students, they have to cross by the intermediate spaces in order to get to their offices. There are all through the building spaces where people can gather, rest, or chat in between classes. Spaces are modulated to favor different kind of gathering. Many things can happen in these intermediate spaces as this informal class. And as we get into the complex, these spaces become wider, larger, until we arrive to its core. Here, the places for gathering are crossed by a stretch of the tropical dry forest, revealing the natural topography.
Edificio A was finally completed on schedule, and classes began in March 2016. The following year, we were invited by Shirley McNamara and Yvonne Farrell to show this project as part of their central exhibition at the Venice Biennale. They wanted the participants to address the concept of free space through their own buildings, where architecture, as they said, provides for the well-being and the dignity of citizens, binding past, present, and future together, building on inherited cultural layers, weaving the archaic with the contemporary. Nothing more important as generosity these days, isn't it? We called our exhibition The Presence of the Absence, bringing to Venice a strong presence of what was already absent in the building, yet essential to its completion. That were the formwork of prefab elements such as the screens and the benches. The Pura formwork there filters the Venetian light, and the qualities of the tropical light of Pura are shown in a video projected directly into the Venetian wall at left.
And 18 years after our research trip to Chicago, Edificio A brought us back to the IIT for the MCHAP prize. We were delighted to see IIT students analyzing our building through wonderful models before the discussion with the other finalists and the members of the jury took place. And when the winner announcement was given, it was an incredible emotional moment.
Finally, we'd like to show you how a normal day go by in this building. He was really arriving late. Huh? In the landscapes of intimacy, space flows from the inside out, creating places to be inhabited between nearness and vastness. Those places have the ambition to turn into microcosmos where a new reality arises from the transformation of what was there before the architectural intervention. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yay, I'm clapping for everybody. So we're connecting here. That was amazing. Thank you for being so generous and sharing inspirations and process and taking us with you through that amazing project. Really life-changing. And I want to introduce Leslie Johnson here, who's our Master of Ceremonies and who's going to talk a little bit about the process for conversation, if anyone has, as we have questions. And so Leslie, welcome.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much, Sandra, Jean-Pierre. It's just beautiful work, and I love the section to the space. It's just I'm so enamored of the conversation. But I want to invite our attendees to enter some questions. We already have one. Vedran, of course, always ready, ready for the conversation. But students, faculty, other guests, please enter any questions or topics of discussion. If you can't formulate it into a question, you just want them to talk about something, use the Q&A, please. But maybe while we transition to that, I could just say that I had the real privilege of being in that photograph. Actually, the discussion that we had about the models that Marcus Malesh, who I think is also lurking around in the audience here, made, and to talk about the building with your client from the university. And it was just such an interesting and beautiful work that I was attracted to the architecture, the kind of spatiality of it. But the conversation was so much about what you all talked about in the process of thinking about the construction. And I remember your amazing client, I'm sorry that I'm forgetting her name.
Maria Pia.
Maria Pia.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. She said we couldn't afford to build a cheap building. And I thought that was such a beautiful way to describe it, that the effort and the clarity of giving form to thought, the construction as it relates to the ideas about place and space and the intimacy and vastness as you're describing, but that deeply rooted in the kind of practical questions of the architecture. And, you know, I don't necessarily have a question, but I thought maybe you could talk about that from the perspective of value, to think about, you know, we couldn't afford to build a cheap building kind of conversation. It was a really nice one. If you'd like to elaborate on that while our guest answer question.
Yeah, we see a question from Vedran. We will come back to that question. I think by Maria Pia, what she was referring was in I think it's maybe it's understandable in a country with little resources, economic resources, and it makes totally sense that when you have little resources, you can't afford a cheap building, in the sense a building that would need a lot of maintenance, or that is in a certain way that will be replaced in 10 or 20 years time. They wanted us to build a building for hundreds of years, if possible. We don't know if we as a human race, we are going to reach from 200 years more in time. But
Very happy to get tomorrow at this point, yeah.
Yeah, but at least that was the aim. And I think what we liked very much from Maria Pia, which was our how do you say, interlocutor, the one with which we were talking, representing the client. She didn't ask us an icon building or something like that. They just asked us for quality, for a quality building.
Yes, I think Maria Pia also was referring to the aim to have a noble building, because this new population deserve it. So it's not because they come from a rural milieu or they are not like urban or rich population, that they don't deserve a really noble spaces and place to learn. So I think that was also a question there.
Yeah.
Lovely. Would you like to address, Vedran is asking about your relationship to Henri, or Enrique, I suppose, Siriani.
Yeah.
I don't know if you want to talk,
Yeah,
maybe introduce who he is. I don't know that all of our audience members know.
Henri Siriani is, or Enrique Siriani, depends where he is in a certain moment in France. It's our French Peruvian big architect, and particularly it's our master, maestro, no? Which taught us how to do architecture in many ways. For me, when I came, because for the people who doesn't know, we were born in Peru, where my name is tricky, but I was not. I have a French grandfather, but I was born in Peru, and Sandra is not Scottish, but she was also born in Peru, and we at a certain stage after we graduated here in Lima, we went to Paris, and I spent like 5 years studying with with Henri Siriani in his office, while Sandra was studying with him. So that was a big immersion to modern architecture. Siriani was the one of the very few architects which in the 1980s was saying that modern architecture didn't end, and we had the responsibility to push forward the modern space, and it was not the postmodern fashion that was arriving, the way to build architecture of quality, but to still going forward, exploring modern space.
Yeah, and he also introduced us to this the preoccupation about social housing and how can we do really architecture of quality for social housing. So how can you do an exceptional, create exceptional conditions for living in a really little spaces. So how to work with the space, how expand the space, how natural light is so important. And those, I think those things were like afterwards basis for our work. No, we did a lot of projects of social housing while we were working in Paris. So that's how we start doing architecture.
Mm-hmm. There's question. We're reading the questions.
Yeah, there's Robert MacArthur also there.
Yeah.
I know. Is that? I mean,
yeah.
I'm writing some books on my shelves behind me right here.
Yeah, and Robert had also the opportunity to visit the building. So we're very glad he could see our building in Pura. And he says, beautiful work and thoughtful connection to history of architecture as well as modernism with Le Corbusier and Kahn. Concrete is the common denominator, and I find your use of the material to be both very appropriate and elegant. How do we give human scale to concrete, something that has challenged many modern architects? Yeah, I think that's, for us, that's a really important issue because it has many sides in which we have been doing concrete in Peru, and concrete for us is not only a wonderful material, but also the available material in the coast of Peru, which is a huge desert. And in a huge desert, you have sand, you have pebbles, and you have all the things that can be used for fabrication of cement. So and there's another thing. The concrete takes the form of the formwork, and that's amazing, an amazing thing. So it adapts to the local technology. So for us, for example, it would be not only impossible, but inappropriate to try to do a concrete as Andos buildings, no? I think it's impossible in many places, but in Peru is really a dream for architects and a nightmare for builders. We thought the formwork could be the opportunity to do a Peruvian concrete by using old wooden planks, because wood is expensive, but it's cheaper than metal. We're in a non-industrialized country, so old wooden planks put together by hand, very
like in an artisanal way.
Yeah, in an artisanal way, because we have a very good craftsmanship, allowed us to make an imperfect concrete, very imperfect concrete. The planks are moved, it becomes an irregular concrete, but it has the enormous advantage that it absorbs another big problem of the desert, that is dust. So our concrete absorbs dust, and it becomes of the exact same color of the desert. So we laugh because there have been many architects asking us the mix of the concrete in order to reach the exact color of the desert, and what was our formula, and we just say, oh, it's normal concrete, but it's the way it's poured in an artisanal formwork that makes it weather. No? And for us, weathering is not about rain, it's about dust. So it weathers and it becomes exactly the same color as the landscape.
And of course, with that thought, we can say that it is logic to do the structure with concrete. And then we are, because of this climate that we have, we are always trying to define space by structure and not adding layers. We don't need layers. So of course, we are really very happy of not needing layers for protection for rain or temperatures or a lot of insulation,
flashing.
Yeah. So we can live structure like that. But we, in a conscious way, we are trying not to add other things, just to stay with essential things. So structures and very simple details.
Yeah, and that's also a strategy, because you know, it's we can say it's a perfect climate, but it's not a perfect country. There's no perfect country. So
it's a protection strategy.
It's a protection strategy because in Peru there's a lot of earthquakes, and normally the clients, not Maria Pia, not the University of Pura, but normally clients can change your project
in the way,
on the way, and without telling you. So the best way, in order that your project is not being changed, is that it's only structure. Nobody in Peru tries to change structure, because the building can simply fall apart.
Yeah,
that's really fascinating. It's like it's entirely a structural condition.
Yeah.
Like it's like you can strip it of nothing. It's such an interesting way, kind of move against that. We would call it value engineering, but as you're saying, that the client can make changes. So that's really interesting. It's bones. They're just bones.
Yes.
Fascinating.
There's another commentary of Jonathan Miller talking about imperfection as a positive value, talking about concrete, also formworks. So it's connected with what we were talking. It's true that that's our ingredients. We have that available, hands craftsmanship. So everybody knows how to do concrete, and also the material. That it's very it's available.
and the difference is that they know how to build well. They don't know how to build perfect. Okay, so that's a very big difference, and I think we lived in France and worked in France and designed Malraux Museum, that was a high-tech building from the 50s. and we transformed it into a museum. It was Maison de la Culture, a culture house by Malraux. It was a very technological building. We worked with Arup, Eiffel, all the leading engineers and builders in Europe. And finally, we thought trying to pursue perfection is these times with this techno-scientific will and trying to be perfect. What happens is that we end very scary about material, because materials are intolerant in a perfect building, in an industrial building. So in Peru, we explored how fascinating could be making the materials tolerant to imperfection. No, making tolerance. I don't know if that's a term in English, but in Spanish, is tolerance is for example, the measure of the joints.
It's the same term. We would use the same term. Yeah. But
So
it's interesting. Sorry.
we like materials with a lot of tolerance, tolerant materials.
So avoiding industrialized materials and using always local technology, local materials, and that's true. It's like an antidote, as Jonathan was saying, no? to these techno-scientific ideals of modernism.
But it's both in the design thinking, it's immediate realization, but also, as you were saying, it's kind of weathering. It's longer. It's longevity, right? It becomes the kind of landscape timeline to think of it as something that weathers or receives or allows for. It's fascinating.
Yeah, there's another question. No? How do you go about encouraging intimacy and a more social use of space? And what resources do you believe can affect the usage of those spaces? Sandra.
So, no, here, as a society, I think people are used to intimacy. Also, in ancient Peru, because occupying the desert was difficult. So living in the desert was difficult. You needed some elements that give you intimacy in order that you can live there. But maybe only a shade, only a wall, and with those basic elements, you had intimacy. Then with Spanish culture,
they were all Moorish.
Yes.
The Spaniards who came here, they were converted Muslims who came here. So it
brings also,
Colonial Lima is very much like a Northern African city or civil at most. So this mood of preserving intimacy is anchored in Liman people, but it's more than that.
Yeah.
I think intimacy.
No, of course, when we work in housing projects, we are conscious that we have to work in the threshold, having balconies, terraces, or elements that can allow you to play with this intimacy, depending on the moment of the day or on the activity or in the usage. But we like to have these possibilities, many possibilities, because it's we have to encourage people opening to the city and relating to.
And finally, this intimacy is also attained by producing these intermediate spaces. No, and that's the opportunity also to be generous, not only with the people who are using the buildings, but also in other projects that we haven't shown today, to give more to the city.
Yeah.
No?
So each time we are trying to give a little public space, and even in the Moqueguas building that we showed, in the competition, the big square public space wasn't asked in the brief. But we were really concerned about that, because you can't have a public building without a public space that offers and contribute to public life, community life. No.
I wanted to ask a question about the actual plantings. You created, a wonderful story of your in your inside outside spaces, your interior outdoor rooms, and but in all the cases there was something growing, something coming out of the ground that was green, and they, used to think of landscape as surface or a pattern or a texture, but in a very curious way, what you were showing, that was almost like it was more like figure, almost like the other, that's the one tree with the planting below, or the way that the trees came through at Edificio A. And I can imagine being in the space by yourself. This idea of intimacy is what's prompting the thinking, and sort of saying, oh, I'm here, and then there's this tree, and we're in this space together, and that tree is kind of keeping us company. And I think I'm interested, because we haven't actually ever talked about it, how the planting comes about, in terms of your planning. Do you, where does that come into the thinking, and are you generating that yourself? Or are you working with someone in the landscape architecture field?
Yeah, normally we don't work with landscape architects, not because we don't want to work with them, but there are no landscape architects in Peru. So there are gardeners at most, and it's not only that thing is that we are in these buildings, we're in the desert. So the fact that we plant one tree in each house is a way to celebrate nature in a place where there's no nature if you don't water it. No, you have to water.
Yeah.
You have to water in order to make something grow up. So not necessarily in Pura, we can expand this, but in Lima, if you don't water, there's nothing growing up. So it's
precious. It's really precious. No?
So it's kind of an offering.
It's like respect.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
To have this, and in Pura, for example, in Edificio A, we really didn't have a real plan to see what we were planting inside the building. It was the things that were growing around, no?
And we were thinking that we wanted a stretch of the tropical dry forest. So it was like some kind of logic to have
and
not carob trees, but they're like a family of carob trees that grows more easily.
And the fact is that, as you know, Dirk, those trees grow their roots very quickly when it's the the rainy phenomenon in El Niño. So it rains heavily every 10 years, and then there's too little rain in order to sustain the forest. But those trees go down 30 meters to attain the watershed, the water table. And if they don't reach the water table, they connect the roots between them in order to have water. So that's amazing. No, that's amazing. And we wanted also to have a strip of this dry forest coming into the building. No?
I'm fascinated by the juxtaposition of the sort of highly refined, carefully planned, the logic of every single element really clear, and then such a strong phenomenological experience of the building. It's all about dark or light, open or closed, tight, loose. You know, I mean, you play in all of them, not just Edificio A. You play so much, the restaurant, the houses, you play so much with manipulating your audience, if you will, with forcing them to experience these different kinds of things, you know, compression and release. They're all there in such tight, small spaces. It's quite extraordinary how you do that.
Yes, it's as in Puruchuco, because we acknowledge that experience because it's really an experience, no? Going from compressed space to expanded space, and then shaded space, and so on. So it for us, it is really an important building.
Yeah, and what happens, and the fact that we love that building is that even if it was from the 15th century, it's completely modern. It's a promenade architectural, no, and
no, and totally abstract, because you don't have decoration. You don't have anything, so
you don't have even windows.
No, it's incredible.
So it's totally abstract. So
Yeah.
so it's a way to relate history or archaic really to contemporary. No, we're the gap between the both situations, architecturally speaking, is very narrow, no? And that's what we want to experience in the buildings that we are designing.
Only this presence of light, matter, and that's it. No space. It's trying to...
It's very phenomenological, if you will, but it's like that.
I have a question, Jean-Pierre and Sandra. So I kind of wanted to bring the conversation maybe back to the idea of social space, and we were talking about intimacy earlier. So specific to Edificio A, I see that you had at one moment talked about like the purposeful kind of crossing of paths from, like, let's say professors and students. And so that kind of, it's a very kind of socio-pedal engagement, and it's encouraging the serendipitous interactions within the building. So my question is, like, was there a specific strategy in curating those moments? Or was it just like a byproduct from the formal composition of the building? And I guess also maybe a second part of it is, like, in observing the building in post-occupancy, were there any kind of unexpected even moments that you found that you saw after the fact? Yeah,
of course there are unexpected things, and we like very, very much to have unexpected things happening in our buildings. But in that precise thing that you are talking about, we worked hand by hand with Maria Pia and other people from the University of Pura.
Gonzalo Escajadillo.
Gonzalo Escajadillo. And there were a lot of discussions. Now I don't remember how could we manage to have all those discussions with so little time to design? But we did it. And one big issue was to respond to faculty desires also, because they were going to work there. So there was these big discussions among us, and I'm saying clients and architects, about what degree of independence had to have these faculty members from the students, and what degree of communication should they have. So it was what we proposed is that, okay, let's them have a very concentrated spaces for work, because otherwise they can't do research, they can't work properly. But in order to reach their offices, they have to cross all the building. So it was made in purpose. And crossing the building in these non-hierarchical spaces, we were hoping that some student would stop the teacher and said and tell him about things, no? And it's not in a classroom, and that's important, because you don't react the same being a student with a teacher in a classroom than in a cafeteria or in a bench, no? So that was very, very important, and we discussed a lot of these kind of things with our clients, and our clients were, in this case, 3 clients, no? The client was university as an institution. They wanted a product. There were the representatives of this university, mainly Maria Pia. And then there was another clients that were the students and the faculty. And the students, they were from 2 different populations. They were going to meet there for the first time. So non-hierarchical spaces, again, were essential in order that there's no segregation, or at least we were trying not to have only spaces where they compete, where they're in competition. And
of course, there is a cafeteria in these intermediate spaces, in between spaces, so that helps also gathering, informal gathering, and exchange ideas and everything like that. But with ideal conditions to be in a hot place. So you have shade and you have a breeze, south breeze. So at the end, this campus, this big campus, has some buildings that are isolated, and they are more the type of scheme, pavilion scheme. So this new landscape of learning landscape became like a new center for the campus, because it offers these gathering spaces, but with ideal conditions to be, because you have to have this well-being sensation to stay there, and then to connect, to reach a professor, or to, so it's a combination.
And the authorities of the university, of course, they made surveys and research about the building, and it not only consumes a lot less energy, etc., but also they found that 30% of the people inside the building are not having classes on it. So that means the people are there for in order to stay. And Maria Pia I remember in the jury sessions in the MCHAP, Maria Pia said, I think that Ricky adored, no? Because she was saying that people belong there. So they have this feeling of belonging. No?
We're all craving those spaces so much these days. I think it makes us, you know, really miss all of those accidental encounters and such. I'm sure it's a void right now in people's lives, particularly this building, but in general, those accidental spaces. I think we'll return to them with a really renewed and very explicit sense of what role they play in our lives, you know.
Yeah. And they think the pandemic can teach us that we need more space.
Yeah.
Not that we don't need space because we're all locked down in our houses now. We need space, but we need more space, more generous.
More gathering spaces than ever.
No, but it seems like you perfectly anticipated this moment with the diversity, the small and the large and the connected and the disconnected, the amazing breadth.
And you know, Dirk, the restaurant we showed here was one of the first restaurants to be open now, because it's ventilated, it's open air, and it has no enclosed spaces. So it's all a terrace.
Huh.
Well, I just want to share with everybody, I've been chatting with Maria Pia. She's here with us, which is so amazing. She joined us tonight. So hi, we love you. We're all living again the amazing experiences both there and here. So Leslie, how are we doing on time? Is that about it, or do we?
Well, it's not for me to determine, it's really for our guests here. So if they would like to read or discuss some of the remaining questions, I think you've actually gotten to most of it, if I'm following correctly. Although Robert McCarter had another comment about the inside-outside room, which you actually did talk about. You were calling them exterior interiors or indoor exteriors, or you had another phrase for it. Maybe you could talk about that, but then, sorry.
A comment about Robert McCarter and veteran, but Leslie, can you read it, because it's
yes, absolutely. I'll read both. Vedran had a nice comment that said Kenneth Frampton now includes you in your project, excuse me, in Casa X and UDEP in the last 5th edition of Modern Architecture, A Critical History. So now you are historical. There you go. You've been
Full circle.
Written in full circle.
But not old, just historical.
I think that's a huge kudos. And McCarter is saying the rooms in Khan's buildings in California, India, Bangladesh were often only 50% enclosed or covered, and the rest were open air. An interesting parallel with your buildings, and all about the intertwining of interior and exterior space, what Le Corbusier called inside-outside rooms.
Yeah, and we visited all those buildings.
Yes.
So we're it's not by chance that we did that.
Yeah, of course.
It's a wonderful phenomenon of climates, of certain kinds of climates. As someone who grew up in the desert myself, the desert lends itself to that. The desert makes itself available to smart architects in ways that certain climates can't do, such as Chicago. You know, it's just a different kind of experience, but you have to be a very, very smart architect to know how to take care of it, or to incorporate that kind of work, those kinds of spaces.
Yeah.
I wanted to share the anecdote that Maria Pia is sharing with us, that you are working on the Library and Learning Lab for the University Learning Center. And I should say again, because that was sort of part of the inception, right, of Edificio A. You had been brought to them because of the library.
Yeah.
And if I remember correctly, you switched the attention to this new building because of the population change in the student body, and only had 6 months to conceive of a new structure. Wasn't that the story? Didn't you start in the library?
We were the advantage we had when they commissioned us the Edificio A was that we already began to work on the site, not the same spot, but on the campus. We already visited the campus, and we talked already with the authorities to design this learning center in the university.
And we started already.
And we started already. And when you came as part of the jury, of the MCHAP jury, I don't remember who asked us if it was you or Rick and telling us when we were telling the story, and you told us, are you, I imagine you are doing the same strategy for the learning center that you have applied here. And
Yeah. We talked about that.
It was another type of building. So we took all the models, take them down, and we started
Again.
all over again. Because
Oh, God.
Yeah. So
Wow.
yeah, there is a project for the learning center before the MCHAP and then
after
after the
the
MCHAP. So
Oh, well,
So
now
now-
we've got an appetite. We're dying to see what that is.
yeah.
We'll look
We're
forward to
working
that.
on it, yeah.
Well, maybe we could say a huge thank you, and maybe we could close out with maybe your ruminations on our contemporary condition. I think Isabel has asked a really nice question to think about. You know, it's so refreshing to see a building designed entirely for people, but with COVID, it's hard to see people being as social, or at least the way we used to for a while. Do you think your design process will change to account for these social changes that came along with the pandemic? Why or why not? Maybe you could give us your thoughts on our collective global situation.
I think people will appreciate more generosity in architecture, because everybody has experienced the need for that. So I think for us architects will be maybe in the conversation with clients will they will understand us better, or maybe yes.
Yeah. And there's another thing, I think, that also we have to understand the pandemic is only one of the effects on our intervention in our planet, and we're causing also this huge climate change, no? This global warming, and I think we should start as architects to change the way we see buildings. I'm just thinking about, for example, air conditioning. No? It's a little bit difficult to talk against heating in Chicago because you will froze in 10 minutes. But there are countries that the south of France don't need heating, for example.
Or here you don't need air conditioning.
Here you don't need air conditioning, but we are so used to comfort that we can't stand a 2 degrees difference, and we want to be in wintertime with t-shirts and in summertime with a jacket, and we have to change our attitude, I think, in all over the world, and that's a change of mindset. And we're here in Peru, we're trying to change the mindset of our clients, at least, because it's very easy. We don't need all that stuff, and but the difficult thing is that we need to get rid of the cultural dependency on the developed countries. That they want to sell us all the air conditioning plants and ventilated facades and everything that is useful maybe in Chicago, but is not useful at all in Peru.
Yeah, and coming with an idea of modernity, you know, the more you have air conditioning, the more you are like technology or modern or developed. So
yeah. And Robert MacArthur in his book, The Space Within, he was referring at some stage, I don't remember exactly, I have a very bad memory, but he was telling how we lost the moment where we lost the building to take care about climate, and we confer this responsibility only to technology and not to architecture.
So we have to come back.
In order that architecture can solve a lot of problems by herself.
Hear to that.
Yeah, here. That's an amazing challenge and direction for all of us. So, Reed, do you want to wrap up for us tonight?
I'd like to let Leslie and the team sign off, but I just want to say 2 thank yous. First of all, to Sandra and Jean-Pierre, of course. I mean, I cannot imagine a better talk. This is exactly why we do these. This is like meeting with your friends in their living room and talking about the work they're doing right there in front of you, the immediacy of the way you speak and of the work itself is just so extraordinarily exciting. I can't wait to fly down there when we get to do that again and crawl all over those buildings. It's just, it's exceptional. And I wanted to also thank the Morgensterns, the whole family, fathers and daughters and God knows whoever else has been part of supporting this talk, the college, the fellowship, the professorship. It just means so much to us. And I understand that we had a couple of the members of the family with us tonight. So yay, thank you. If you're here afterwards and want to say hello, please stay online. But anyway, thank you to all of you. And thanks to the students for coming out. Always thanks to the students. You guys are terrific. And there's Jennifer. And we're thrilled that you are here to enjoy this. So Leslie, you want to take us out?
I'm going to pass to Dirk. Thank you, Sandra. Thank you, Jean-Pierre. I just want to echo what Rita said. It's just lovely to hear you talk about architecture and to see your beautiful work. And if it's new to anyone in the audience, please look at more, because that's just the tip of the beautiful iceberg. So thank you again for your time and work.
Thank
Leslie,
you.
thanks so
Hope
much.
to see you again in Chicago. Huh?
Yeah, we're definitely inviting you back, and we will also be coming together for the launch of the book after the new year. So
Not inviting, requiring a return. This is not optional. This is not optional.
Great. All right. Thanks so much. Wonderful.
Thank you. And if I can ask the host committee here to stay online for a few minutes as we say goodbye to the guests. And Jennifer, we'd be terrific if you could stay with us as well. Oh, we might have lost Jennifer. No, there she is. So if you all could stay with us, and thank you to the students, and have a great evening.
That was really nice. Very cool. And the writing and the answers, the questions and answers works pretty well.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
I
it
have to
does.
say you've been our most attuned to that process of all of our guests. So I'm really glad that you.
Hello.
Hey, Jennifer.
Hello, Jennifer.
Hi.
Say hi. I'm like very unprofessional looking right at the moment, and got hungry teenagers in the background. But thank you so much. That was lovely. That was a wonderful lecture and discussion.
Excellent.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you
Yes.
for
for your support. Yeah.
For your
I know my parents were on for most or some of the call or the lecture, and not sure who else, if Robin or my brother joined. So thank you all. It's so nice to see everyone's faces too. I wish we were in person.
Yes,
yeah.
we wish.
We want to know what's for dinner, Jennifer.
Well, we recently purchased a barbecue, and having been a raw vegan for many years, I'm making steak and hamburgers.
Oh boy, you've gone over to the dark side.
Onto the dark side, yes. I don't know. This is what happens when you have teenagers, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, we welcome you. It's a wonderful place to be. So
Yes, the meat eaters of us.
the meat eaters of the world unite.
Yes, well, you know, I'm back on. I guess I'm back on the dark side, but on the non-industrial dark side.
Yeah.
The better dark side. I had a
That's great.
I had a professor of architecture. I don't know, I'm blanking on his name. A Japanese professor who would always, this is when I was at University of Texas, would say, "Food is much more interesting than architecture." There's a gorgeous sketchbook of sushi and rolls and all sorts.
Yeah, you have to come. You have to come to Peru because here gastronomy is.
Yeah.
I would love that. I would love that.
It's amazing food, and Peruvian food has had a big moment in the U.S. over the last 10 years, which means we are only just getting to know a little bit about it. Because you only get those 8 restaurants and whatever they think. So we all have to learn much more.
Yeah, and it's really very good because it's and I'm talking from a family of an Italian mother, so big
Food is super important.
Because in Peru there were all this mixture, all the fusion before the avant la lettre, no? Between Chinese, Japanese, Italian, Spanish, and Inca, no? So
it's an amazing cuisine. The first time I had it was at a restaurant in Washington, D.C., one of Jose Andres's restaurants, and I just couldn't believe it. It was like every cuisine you wanted all thrown together in one place. You didn't have to go to 4 restaurants. It was on the menu. They were all there.
Also because here you have the ocean, the Pacific, the coast, then the mountains. So you have
a lot of products.
And the Amazonian forest. So a variety of products of different altitudes. So it's really a wide range.
We ended up talking about food,
Sometimes I find that actually food analogies are much easier way to get into the conversation about a design process. Like, do you add ingredients? How long do you bake it? Sometimes it's actually an easier way to think about design, to think of it as baking or cooking. So I'm on board with that conversation any day.
Not to mention consuming it.
That too.
It's a little less fattening. Building architecture is a little less fattening.
Crazy. Oh, Daniel's joined us as well too.
Sorry, Dirk.
Well, I just saw Daniel's with us too.
Yes, Daniel's taken his picture away and joined us live.
I've been here.
I've got to run, guys, but thank you so much, and it was really wonderful. Nice to
Great to see you, Jennifer.
Jennifer, thank you, and thanks to the whole family for this. It's just such a treat. As you can see, it's such a treat.
You're welcome. We're like just feel really grateful to be able to do this and for everyone. So okay.
All right, feed that teenager now.
Well, we are going to come visit you guys too.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. That's a major promise. I don't know if you'll be here first or we'll be there, but we're all looking forward to being able to open our wings and be.
We have to do, Dirk, we have to do a book presentation.